ahead and get started. I'm recording it so we can put it on our workplace for those. We have a lot of agents that still work day jobs that are making that transition, so they can't join us. A couple of them will try to sneak in. I know I'll look and see their name like, you're at work, and then sneaking in, but we won't tell. But thank you so much for taking the time to join and meet with us. We're really trying to live the habit of open the house. And so we do our open house call every week. We've had some great speakers. We had Samantha Bianchi from $1 Million Listings last week. We had Nick, of course, David Knox. And then next week we have one of our agents who's killing it when it comes to expireds. So we're going to invite him on to share his tips and tricks and what he's doing. But I'm a big fan of everything that you and your team have done with the rebranding. I tell the story locally. I was an agent for 2 years. I left. I was a Centurion, opened up One Blue's independent brokerage. And then in March, while y'all were here in Orlando in our backyard, I see all these posts come out of this new rebranding. And I just remember calling John over here in the office, like, look at what Century 21 did. Oh my God, I want in. I want to go back. Fast forward 2 months, Rick Ellis knocks on my door. I'm like, how funny, 2 years ago you said no, and now you're saying, let's talk. I don't know if I want this, Rick, trying to play with them. And so here we are. But I mean, an amazing job of in my opinion, and I know there's some naysayers out there on Facebook, on Workplace, but it's incredible. Here in the market, everybody's loving it.
Oh, that's fantastic. We love to hear that. So we like to hear those types of stories. And, I think for some people, change is difficult and change represents risk, but, risk and change are also really important things to take to move things forward. So we feel that that's an important move to make. So, some people it takes a little longer than others, but also it's also nice to see some people who felt a little bit challenged with it at first are also, once they see it go into the market and agents and consumers really gravitating toward it, a lot of people who felt a little unsure at first are also seeing that it really does work and it is important. And so we're seeing those minds change too. So that's a really cool thing to see happen.
Well, our paths cross different time periods, but I also, before real estate, worked for Hilton. So my very first job was at Hampton Inn in Slidell. I opened it, but my last job was at the Memphis Operations Center, doing all the GM leader training for Hampton Homewood and Home 2. So when I heard that the marketing person in charge of everything here was from Hilton, I'm like, well, she's got to be awesome then, right? So what made you make the transition? I mean, you've got an impressive background, in jobs. Why Century 21? What about this company, this brand appealed to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Just to share a little bit about my background, a long time ago, when I was 10, of course, I started in advertising. So marketing and advertising background. In college, I thought I wanted to be a graphic designer, actually. So I spent a lot of time, half a degree in design and half of a degree in marketing. And what I found in design was you can't force that idea. So, you had a project due, so you had to do it. And inevitably about midnight, the night before it was due, I would come up with the idea I really liked. So I'd have to trash everything and restart. And I thought, I can't live my life this way, because that's a really tough thing to do. So I gravitated more toward the marketing side than the design side. But having that design background has always been incredibly useful. So I love that background, but I'm happy I went toward marketing. And I think I'm one of the few people who actually is doing what they went to college for, other than maybe a doctor or something like those professions that you actually do need the degree in. So that's mildly interesting. But spent some time in ad agencies and then worked for Hilton for about 13 years. So was with Hilton when it was really just the Hilton brand, and we had just launched Garden Inn. And then Hilton acquired Promise, which was Hampton Homewood, DoubleTree, and Embassy Suites. And then Hilton actually purchased Hilton International. Previous to that, we were two companies that sued each other, which is a little bit challenging when you share a brand name. So that was a really interesting time too. So expanded internationally. And I sat in the middle of the loyalty program for most of my time there. So really focused on driving that brand loyalty and looking at how we expanded the brands internationally, because when we acquired Hilton International or came together, it was a lot about how do we expand into some of those really key markets and take a Hampton Inn or a DoubleTree by Hilton into China and not confuse the market with using that Hilton name that was known, but also helping explain what DoubleTree is in a new market. So a lot of branding work on the international side, and understanding those local nuances, but also understanding that about 70 or 80% is the same no matter where you are in the world, but then you need to also be locally relevant. So a lot of that work is actually very relevant to what we're doing today, because it's a people-to-people business and it's a relationship-driven business. After Hilton, I spent a little bit of time at a company called Epsilon, which managed Hilton's database. So a lot of database marketing, analytics, really understanding how to utilize data and analytics. I launched the beta program for what is now Walgreens Balance Rewards, and then launched a loyalty program for Canadian Tire, which when they asked me to do that, I said, why does a tire company need a loyalty program? But Canadian Tire, if you're familiar with Canada, that's actually the target of Canada. And it's such a strong brand, which shows you the power of branding. It's such a strong brand in Canada that Target tried to go into Canada and actually pulled out because of Canadian Tire. So shows you that if you brand well, the name actually may not matter. It's how people feel about the brand and the experience that you deliver whenever you engage with that brand. And then I went to American Express. My whole time at Hilton, I had worked with American Express, a really strong partner and another really great brand. And from a culture standpoint, which I think culture is really important because that's something that we're working on right now at Century 21, Amex had a lot of the same cultural aspects that Hilton had. And I had worked with American Express pretty much my entire career at Hilton. So that was really interesting to me because I was missing that feeling that Hilton had when I left Hilton, because we had this just great, you know it, we had this great kind of family feeling, and we're also doing great work that was very customer focused. And we got bought by private equity, and that changed, because private equity is not necessarily about being customer centric. It's very, very bottom line driven. And it's not that we weren't bottom line driven, but we had a nice balance of the two. And the Blackstone came in right when the stock market dropped in 2008. And so it kind of changed the dynamic at Hilton.
And they had transformation. I remember people talking about that.
Exactly. So Amex was really appealing because really smart people at American Express, a great company, and those similar cultural aspects. And if you think about American Express has really continued to redefine themselves. They're over 100 years old, but they are the ones who started the levels of cards. So they started the gold card, the platinum card, the black card that we all know, the plunk factor. So now you're seeing everyone have the really heavy metal cards. American Express started that with the Centurion card, and now you've got it with the platinum cards. Now Chase is doing it with their Sapphire product. Citi's venturing into that, and American Express has really been the one pushing those boundaries and really pushing the rewards cards. American Express had the very first co-brand card that allowed you to earn currency on a card. So a lot of firsts at American Express for such an old company, continuing to redefine themselves. So really interesting organization to be a part of. I got a phone call while I was there. I had a couple of different roles there. American Express had acquired the Macy's portfolio, so a very female-oriented portfolio, which Amex tends to skew male. So that was a really interesting portfolio to work on to help American Express think a little bit differently about how to attract a cardholder. And then I was part of a startup group within American Express for kind of a coalition loyalty program. I got a call while I was there to move to Tahoe, which I am a skier. I'm a big sports person. And that was with private equity. So I thought, just looking at my background, balancing private equity with a lot of public company experience and doing something I love made a lot of sense. So that was a CMO role for private equity at 2 ski resorts in Tahoe. So I said, hey, why not? So I moved back west. I've crisscrossed the country a few times and lived in pretty much every major metropolitan area too. So I went out there, and the thing that I actually didn't factor into that equation was, which seems pretty obvious looking back, is how absolutely dependent you are on snow in the ski industry. And California was in the midst of the last 2 years of a major 4-year drought. So it was a really challenging time, but I also learned a heck of a lot in how to really maintain margins and maintain profitability in really challenging snow conditions, which if anyone's a skier, I know I lived in Florida for a couple of years. I went to school in Miami, and I didn't ski when I was in Miami because there was a lot of other things to do there. So I know sometimes in Florida, it's maybe not top of mind to go skiing, but very dependent on snow. So learned a lot, great career opportunity, but wanted to get kind of back into the mainstream and out of that kind of niche industry. And so what brought me to Century 21, which I think was your question, I'm long-windedly getting to it, was I wasn't thinking about real estate and Century 21 was not top of mind. A recruiter called me. And I didn't know that Century 21 was in 80 countries. I hadn't really thought about the brand other than it's obviously a very well-known brand. And she called me, and as I started really researching and thinking about the brand, it became more and more and more interesting. The more I talked to people in the brand, from a culture standpoint, it had a lot of those feelings of Hilton. I realized the parallels with hospitality, and there are also some parallels with financial services from being a very people-oriented relationship type business. And so I really liked the culture and the people side of it a lot. And I saw that there was this massive opportunity because from an industry and brand standpoint, it's ripe for change. And so to come in at a time when change was needed and there's so much happening within the industry and then also this huge opportunity in the brand, it just seemed like a really great opportunity with a great group of people. So that's what attracted me to it.
So when you think about, the iconic brand that we are, and you've worked for a couple other iconic brands. I mean, Hilton is about as iconic as it gets in my mind, but I'm a little partial to the Conrad story, spreading the light and warmth of hospitality. But what led to the decision of, hey, let's just, as Nick says, burn the house down instead of a refresh, instead of a tweak and a launch, kind of like what NAR did, or what RE/MAX recently did as well. They kind of just tweaked their image. I'm not complaining. I love what you did, but why the big change?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we've been around for 47, almost 48 years now. And essentially the brand has never changed. There was a change to the house, but the actual typography has never changed in 47 years. And we took a hard look at that. We spent a long time really researching the history, the equity that was in it, and spending a really long time. And we looked at we talk about it as an evolution or a revolution, and we looked at both options. And when we looked at those opportunities that felt more like an evolution than a revolution, it felt way too close to where we currently were and way too safe. And I do want to say that we're really focused on the rebranding right now because that's what everyone's looking at implementing right now and what we're in the midst of. But the rebranding is just a small piece. Well, it doesn't feel small. It is a small piece of the overall positioning. And this is really about the change we're trying to make in the category and what we're trying to stand for within the category, which is a way bigger, bold ambition. And if we want to live up to that, we needed to also be bold with where we were going with our mark, because it all ladders up to that bold ambition of defying mediocrity and delivering extraordinary experiences, which I can explain some of the thinking behind that, because there's this huge opportunity in the category to really set ourselves apart. And we honestly, we're aware of what the RE/MAXes and the Keller Williams and all the other brands are doing and the newer entrants into the market. But there's this opportunity to say, what do we want to be within real estate? And we really looked outside the category for inspiration on that, as opposed to just trying to play catch up or trying to imitate what someone else is doing, or just incrementally do what other people are doing a little bit better. So that really led us to the revolution, because we know what our grand ambitions are and we know what we want to be in the category. And in order to do that, we needed to make a bold change. And we also needed to make sure that we had a mark that was relevant for you and everyone who's part of the system for today and for years to come. So we felt like we needed to make that big change. Had we done this 15 years ago, then it probably would have made more sense to be in that evolution phase. Because if you look at most of those major organizations, if you look at the Walmarts, the FedExes, the Hiltons of the world, they've changed their marks every 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 years. So if you look at where they were 47 years ago to where they are now, it's a revolution. But most people don't realize that because they don't look at what's happened along the way. So it's I think whenever you look at some people who are struggling with the change, it's, well, so-and-so hasn't done this. Well, they haven't looked where they were 47 years ago to where they are today. People have completely changed their color palette. Their mark doesn't resemble what it looked like at all 47 years ago. You've just seen those step changes along the way.
When we look at Hilton, it was the H with the circle around it. Then they went to the weird gold. It was blue. Then we went to gold and black with the H
Oh,
and
and
box.
well, absolutely. And it was a script mark when I started. And then before that, it was something else. So, I mean, they've changed tons of times. Walmart used to be brown and it's blue now. And they've had several iterations. FedEx has completely changed their numbers, changed their name. Southwest dropped their plane. I hear a lot about, oh my goodness, we don't have a house. No one will know we sell real estate. Well, Southwest doesn't have a plane in their mark anymore. They have a heart. But I think that people still understand that they're an airline and that they fly airplanes. So I think there's some parallels to that are very relevant in today's world.
Yeah, FLA 21, Nick's like, did anyone think Southwest got into the Valentine's business?
Exactly.
So. And it's a great point. So you hear a lot about, especially on workplace, and our agents have brought it to and talked to me about it, which is why I was really excited to talk to you. And I've shared that it wasn't done in a vacuum. You didn't make this decision to, burn the house down, as Nick says, without knowing what you were doing. Can you talk a little bit about the research and what led into like that kind of validated the decision to do what was done?
Yeah, absolutely. So we did a lot of brand health research. We talked to both agents and brokers within Century 21. We talked to agents and brokers and other brands, and we talked to the end consumer. And what we heard loud and clear is the brand is old. It's not looked at as the future, and we needed to make a change. And that was really compelling for us. As we started that positioning work that I was just talking about, we included brokers, we include our own brokers, we included agents in the process. So we didn't just sit in the corporate office and just sit within ourselves and work on this. We absolutely included system members in the process. Now, fast forward to actually working on the identity work, we did a ton of background on what is the history, what does the mark mean? We're in 80 countries. What does the color mean in those countries? What does the mark mean in those countries? Because we had to be sensitive to all of the countries that we operate in. So a ton of background research and due diligence went on before we actually even started the design exploration. So a lot of work went into that. And I know I've seen some posts about, why didn't they give us options? Why weren't we involved in that? Just from a really practical standpoint, one, it's really hard to make decision by committee. That never works no matter what you're trying to do. You would know that as being an owner of a business. But more importantly, from a legal standpoint, you've got to apply for trademarks to protect your mark before anyone sees it. So just from a really practical standpoint, you've got to protect the mark. Otherwise, someone else will take it and apply for that, and then we wouldn't be able to protect the mark. So just from a purely practical standpoint, you can't go out with, hey, here's our 5 options. What do you think? And take a poll. It's just not possible in the world of trademarking. So that's something that I think people just don't understand. And even just the trademark process across 80 countries is pretty complex whenever you think about that.
I can imagine. That's why we have an amazing legal team.
Exactly.
Yeah. So one of the cool things that I was impressed with, and I have to admit, my first gut reaction was a lot of what I see on Workplace when it comes to our signs is that, wow, I mean, the agent's name is so small, like, wow, what are they doing? But then as I researched more and before I opened my mouth, I tried to learn a little bit. And I heard, I think it was either you or Nick in a video, one of the promos talk about hierarchy of information and putting the right information in front of the consumer at the right time. Talking a little bit about why, why is that hierarchy important, and how you factored it into our design?
Yeah, that's another great question. And that's something else that we spent a lot of time on. And I think at first glance, some of the things I've seen, which just really almost breaks my heart, is they don't care about the agent. And this is absolutely all about the agent, because what we want to do is get closer to the consumer to drive the consumer to the agent in a much more productive way. So this is 121% about the agent and making the sign work as hard as possible for the agent. In order to do that, the consumer needs the easiest, fastest, quickest way to make that connection with the agent. And what we're seeing, and we tested it and we talked to consumers too, what we were seeing is when you have a sign that has competing pieces of information, 4 or 5 or 6 competing pieces of information, the consumer doesn't know what to do, and it's very confusing for the consumer. We really looked at that hierarchy and spent a lot of time focused on that. And the consumer needs to know immediately who to call, how to reach the agent. And they need that phone number, period. So we made the phone number the biggest piece of information so the consumer could connect with the agent really easily. And, you know, I think it was Nick who talked about that. You should really interrogate each piece of marketing material and think about, what is that piece of material meant to do? And then on that piece of material, you need to have one focus point. I often point to Google or to Nordstrom, and they're very different examples. But if Google can be so disciplined about that homepage, you go on it and it just says Google. There is nothing else on that page. And I can imagine the amount of revenue that could be thrown at Google for advertising, for whatever they could put on that homepage. And they have stayed very, very disciplined about keeping that page blank. And it's probably why they've become the #1 search engine. And there's nothing even comparable. YouTube's #2, but Google far and away is the #1 search engine. And it's because it's a clean, simple experience. And you're not getting confused with other messaging there. Nordstrom, another great example. They have far less merchandise per square foot than a Macy's, a Bloomingdale's, et cetera. And they sell far more per square foot because they're not confusing the consumer with too much choice. So there's some really great examples out there about why it absolutely works, because if you present consumers with too much choice, consumers do nothing. So we did spend a ton of time on that. I know it's a change for people, but it is absolutely done first and foremost with the agent in mind, to make the agent as productive as possible and connect them with the consumer as quickly as possible.
I was actually speaking with a broker the other day, and he kind of said the same thing. It's, you know, they don't care about the agents. They're actually, they're caring about the consumer to care for the agent. It's kind of like going back to the hospitality industry. If you take care of your staff, the team, they'll take care of the guest. Well, if we can take care of the consumer here, make sure the consumer is getting that agent information, what do our agents care about? They care about getting the leads. They care about getting the closings. If we can make that as easy as possible for the consumer to connect with them versus Zillow or Trulio or Realtor.com, it's in the end for the agent going down Customer Boulevard.
Absolutely. If you look at a lot of the so-called disruptors in the industry, they are going to the heart of the matter. They're trying to solve those consumer pain points, and they're focused on the consumer. And where we will get ourselves in trouble is if we stay in that kind of older school frame of mind and continue to focus just on ourselves and the agents. Not that the agents aren't important, because the agents are first and foremost important, but we have to think about how to drive that business to the agents and how to make sure and connect the consumer with the agents versus just making ourselves happy. Because if we're making ourselves happy, are we driving business to ourselves? So we are very much focused on growth and making sure that we're helping agents grow. I mean, you hear Nick say it all the time. Every single day we get up thinking about how do we help agents sell more homes and put more money in their pockets. And that is exactly what our goal is. So we are not trying to detract from the agents. We are trying to absolutely help agents sell more homes. And by doing that, we're trying to connect the consumer with the agent and trying to not have all that competing information. And I drive by yard signs every single day, and you can't read them. There's 5 pieces of information, you can't read them. And I would argue that you can't read any yard sign driving by 40 or 50 miles an hour. You do need to stop, but then you want that phone number front and center. And you want to just be able to get that phone number, make that phone call to the agent. So if you don't take anything else away, we are 100%, 121% agent focused, but it's about getting that consumer to you. So we are going about it a little bit differently than others. And I do want to say, which this is you didn't ask, but as we move into 2019, you know, we're continuing on this journey to really bring our positioning to life. And one of the big things we're focused on is really bringing that respectability to the agent. Because from research, we see it. There's this huge love affair with the category. You've got more people engaging in searching for homes and the love affair with the category, people watching HGTV more than kids watching Disney, and all that has become the new pastime. But yet that love affair for the category doesn't translate to those of us who work in it. So one of our missions in life is to elevate that perception of the agent. and really bring respectability to the agent. We think we believe that we're the right brand to do that too, because of our history, because of all the firsts that we've had in our past. So you're going to start to see some really interesting work around that, because what that does too is it starts to make consumers understand why they need to care about that agent they pick, which is what you started to see in the ads that we produced last year, which is calling out, you need to care about that agent you pick. You actually need to care about that agent you pick more than the restaurant you choose or searching for your vacation. Because right now, people are spending more time searching for a restaurant or holiday than they are searching for the right real estate agent, which is crazy whenever you think about how much a strong agent can make a difference in your overall experience. And right now they're going, oh, hey, Kevin, do you know an agent? Okay, great, I'll take them. Versus really spending the time to understand really great agents. And that's just crazy whenever you think about it. But it goes back to consumers not understanding. They're using agents and they get that they need to, but they're not understanding all that value that an agent brings to the table after the offer is signed. Because there's so much that happens after that offer is signed. So that's what we're about, is really trying to call that out and bring that to life. And we feel so strongly about that because agents work so hard and make such a difference in that overall experience.
I could not agree more. And I'm not wearing a Century 21 shirt because I'm teaching a licensure class today. So we have the school logo on because the state won't allow me to wear a Century 21 logo in the classroom. So I just want you to, I'm like, great, I'm going to be talking with you and I'm not going to be able to wear a 21 polo today. That was timing. But anyway, so one of the big questions I get, and I'm trying to help the agents, and I would love to hear your perspective on it. The brand is passing this awesome mark, in my opinion, down to us as franchises. How can agents, from a CMO perspective, what advice would you have for them to be able to leverage this new mark and all this new branding to connect with consumers and grow their business?
Yeah, so everything that we do at the national level, we try to make sure that you have ways to activate that on the local level. So I would make sure and absolutely stay engaged with what we're doing and watch for those opportunities. We are working on a social playbook, which will be coming out soon. We are, talk about burning things down. We are burning down 21 online. It's horrible. I will own that. I from the day I've gotten here, it's absolutely horrible. So that will be coming out early in the year. And I'm so excited about it because it will, if we do our job right, you won't recognize it, which I think is really great. We've gone through several rounds of testing and user experiences with oh, Jesus. I don't know what that is, but sorry. I've got a
Sounds like a fire alarm.
Yeah, I've got a fire alarm going off